Halo 2 was originally going to be the last Halo game. But after a terrible crunch, the cutting of the campaign's entire third act, and yet the most successful game launch in history, Halo 2 became one of the world's most influential games. My name is SameToken, and today we'll be looking back at how Halo 2 became the highest grossing entertainment product ever. This is Halo 2 Retrospective. Following the completion of Halo Combat Evolved, Bungie's offices were practically empty. The team had passed through hell, coming out kicking and screaming with a revolutionary game. They could have been forgiven if they decided to just stop there. But that wasn't the culture at Bungie. Their initial pride turned into a motivation to somehow do better next time. And so, at some point in early 2002, less than a year after the release of Halo, Bungie's co-founder, Jason Jones, decided that they would be making Halo 2. Some at Bungie were surprised by this choice. Jason Jones was known for hating sequels, but he felt he owed it to everyone at the studio. After all, Combat Evolved saw enough brilliant ideas cut out at the last minute to make an entirely new game. Authorization for a sequel came quickly, a mere 5 months after the release of Combat Evolved. With the success of Halo, Microsoft confidently lent their support to execute more ambitious concepts. Bungie now had more creative and monetary freedom than they had ever seen before, but with this came huge expectations. Ideas for Halo 2 were flowing. Director of Cinematics, Joseph Staten, wanted to explore a whole new world. Look beyond the Master Chief and into the Covenant. An early conversation was led with the question, what if you were the guy whose life was on the line for protecting the most valuable religious object in the universe? And you blew it. This character would be known as the Dervish. However, as this name was taken directly from the religion of Islam, and to avoid appropriating religious beliefs, it was eventually changed to the Arbiter. Now, not all at Bungie were keen with the idea of the Arbiter. Art director Marcus Leto felt it was deviating too far from Halo's core, while Marty O'Donnell was concerned this twist would not have nearly the same impact as the Flood did in Combat Evolved. However, Staten managed to convince everyone of this dual perspective. This was the opportunity to have a whole new sandbox with Covenant weapons, allies, and narratives. Halo 2 would see Master Chief sharing his story with a new character and from a new perspective. At this point, they knew Xbox was going online. Up until now, multiplayer games on Xbox had to be played locally, and for most people, that meant up to 4 people fighting over the same display. For online multiplayer in 2001, PC was the best option. However, Microsoft would challenge this throne with the release of Xbox Live. Now, concerningly, Sega had already tried and failed to cultivate an online gaming platform on the console with the Dreamcast and SegaNet. Unlike Sega, however, Xbox Live requires the use of a broadband connection, and Microsoft shipped all of their Xboxes with hard drives. All of this ensured fast, stable connections while also enabling a wealth of downloadable content. Xbox Live was a huge success, and so as a flagship title, Jason Jones wanted Halo 2 to have a strong online presence. Combat Evolved's multiplayer was originally supposed to mix players and artificial intelligence in a large-scale battle, a bit like Halo 5's Warzone. Initially, Halo 2 was going to use this Warzone format while also removing support for arenas, split screen, and LAN. In other words, we may have lost all of the things people grew to love about the original Halo. Multiplayer lead Max Hoberman argued that they absolutely had to support people who wanted to play locally, and that even though the way Combat Evolved's multiplayer turned out wasn't exactly what they had planned, people loved it exactly the way it was. Adding to this, not everyone could experience 8 to 16 player arenas. Xbox Live was the perfect opportunity to open this to more players, not just those with System Link. Fortunately, Jason Jones and Bungie's other co-founder Alex Serpian agreed, placing Hoberman in charge of the arena mode. With a small team and practically no resources, Hoberman went to work creating the arena mode that would supplement the large-scale Warzone mode. At this point, Halo 2 was starting to bloat, and to make matters worse, Bungie was facing a growing internal crisis. Discussions on Halo 2 were happening in insular groups that were not communicating, pulling the project in different directions. Everyone had their own idea of what Halo 2 was going to be. Compounding these challenges, Serpian left Bungie to pursue other projects, and in early 2003, Jason Jones was also committed to Bungie's other project, an RTS-like game under the working title Phoenix. All this when E3 2003 was right around the corner. Jason Jones's philosophy for E3 is to have more balls in the air than you can catch, to push boundaries, to impress the audience, bettering your game in the process. And so, animations, models, and even mechanics that didn't exist until days before E3 were created. And this included the ability for players to hijack vehicles. Bungie's engineers had developed a graphics engine known as Stencil, which used a highly accurate shadowing technique, very similar to what would be used in id's Doom 3. However, as this lighting model was extremely resource-intensive, the E3 demo had to be choreographed perfectly to avoid framerate dips that could then desync Marty O'Donnell's soundtrack. The final product looked highly polished. It had the appearance of a game ready for release rather than one almost 2 years from launch. With Joseph Staten on the controller, the crowd were ecstatic. It looked bigger and better than Combat Evolved. The stakes were also higher. Master Chief looked brilliant, and the music once again sent tingles down the spines of everyone in attendance. But this was all smoke and mirrors. The Stencil engine could never be shipped. It was too resource-intensive and impractical for use in anything other than a tightly controlled demo. Despite all of these long hours from the engineering team, the engine had to be scrapped, instead bringing back and improving on the engine from Combat Evolved. And there was an even more pressing issue. When talking about Bungie's culture, Jason Jones commented that if a game doesn't entertain them in 5 minutes, they stop playing. And in its current state, Halo 2 was not yet fun. E3 was a huge success, fueling even more hype into an already anticipated game. It was becoming clear that Bungie's future was dependent on the success of Halo 2, a game that was currently in trouble. And so, Jason Jones turned his full attention to Halo, cancelling Project Phoenix and bringing the entire studio into the Halo 2 team. All distractions were gone, and all hands were on deck. They started with a redesign of the campaign. Missions were just taking too long to produce. All the new missions were being created on whiteboards. They were working and reiterating so fast on the levels that they had nothing recorded permanently. If it was erased from the whiteboard, it was gone forever. Anything deemed non-essential was stripped back or removed entirely. Originally, Halo 2 was going to have 3 acts, with the third seeing Chief and the Arbiter coming together, discovering the Ark, and fighting through hordes of scarabs before returning to Earth for one final stand. This was going to be the last Halo game, neatly finishing the fight in a single package. There were no plans for further sequels. However, Bungie's ambitions clashed with their lack of time. They had to make cuts and make them fast, and so, with a heavy heart, the entirety of the third act had to be removed, a process Joseph Staten describes as brutal and horrible. But there was no other option. Staten quickly drafted plans for lopping off the third act without requiring a whole new set of levels. A cliffhanger was proposed. Others in Bungie weren't so convinced, with Marty O'Donnell concerned that people would be throwing their controllers at their TVs. After all, the second act ends with the Arbiter and not the Master Chief. Players would only see Chief in a final cutscene, stating that he would be finishing the fight. But they would not be finishing the fight. Not yet, anyway. As the release deadline approached, more cuts were on the table. That Warzone-like multiplayer was completely cut, instead using Hoberman's Arena mode as the official multiplayer. With Hoberman's direction, Halo 2 was going to try something new for Xbox Live, creating what Microsoft were calling a virtual couch. A party system where you and your friends could combine together and take each other from game to game. A feature we probably take for granted today. Players could now customize their online identity by changing their Spartans' colors and emblems. And, perhaps the greatest feature of all, matchmaking was created. The idea behind this was to not only get players into a game as quickly as possible, but also into one that they would find fun. By matching people of similar skills and ranks, games would be more intense and less frustrating. Now staff were working 7 days a week, sleeping on their desks, sleeping on other people's desks. The crunch for Halo 2 has been described as immeasurable. With Combat Evolved, they had about 5 weeks at the end to polish the game, with engineering lead Chris Butcher believing that last 5% was responsible for 30% of the game's success. But they had none of this for Halo 2. There was no time for polish. Yet, Bungie's staff would not allow their game to suffer. Instead, their obsession with quality and their desire to one-up Combat Evolved drove them to extreme working hours. As the end of 2004 approached, with its November 9th release date, Bungie increased their work pace even more. It was now or never. This was going to be the last year of Xbox before the Xbox 360 replaced it the following year. So Halo 2 had to release, and it had to be good. While Bungie's developers were going through this torture, fans grew more excited in anticipation for Halo 2, with 1.5 million copies being pre-ordered, an industry record at the time. Fueling this, Microsoft contracted 42 Entertainment to market the game. The I Love Bees campaign first came to the attention of gamers with the Halo 2 cinematic trailer. At the end of the trailer, the mysterious ilovebees.com website is revealed. Following this link takes you to what appeared to be a beekeeping website called Margaret's Honey that had been apparently hacked, with corrupted graphics and strange text overlaid across the site. This, however, was what is known as an alternate reality game. People across the world grouped together to crack the strange codes hidden within the text, finding that they were in fact GPS coordinates of payphones across the US. Answering these phones at the correct time would lead to a professionally acted soundbite to be unlocked on the website, building the story of an AI construct from the Halo universe known as Melissa. She had been trapped on the ilovebees.com web server after accidentally time traveling. The end of this short story sees her being repaired and sent back to her time just as the Covenant began to invade Earth, corresponding with the beginning of Halo 2. Players who participated were invited to visit one of 4 cinemas where they could then play Halo 2 before its release. Back at Bungie's offices, they were now winning the fight in bringing their project under control, with some describing eureka moments throughout development that hinted at the game's eventual success. For game design lead Jamie Griesemer, his eureka moment was getting the vehicle boarding mechanic working, while for Chris Butcher, it was getting the network code up and running for an internal test of the multiplayer. At that point, he knew they were going to make it and that the multiplayer would be awesome. Along with Valve's Half-Life 2 and Rockstar's GTA San Andreas, Halo 2 was one of 2004's most anticipated titles. And finally, Halo 2 was finished. A record 2.4 million copies were bought in the first 24 hours, the highest opening weekend of any entertainment product. Bungie, despite all of the development challenges, pulled ahead. Halo 2 scored almost as highly as its predecessor, impressive for a sequel to such a revolutionary game. Halo 2 was smoother, prettier, and shinier than Combat Evolved, with critics impressed at the size of its levels and lack of loading screens. The stencil engine may have been absent, but in no way does the game's graphics suffer. Critics also praised its skyboxes. Where Combat Evolved showed the sheer scale of the ring arcing into the sky, Halo 2 places an even greater emphasis on size, from giant distant lakes to colossal structures thousands of feet across. Halo 2's skyboxes instilled a sense of wonder in the breaks between annihilating the enemies. While its cutscenes often suffers from texture pop-in, once you're in the game, Halo 2 is as smooth as ever. And of course, Marty O'Donnell and his staff once again produced an incredible soundtrack. High Charity Suite from the soundtrack is a brilliant example of what makes Halo 2 unique. Its beautiful rhythm perfectly captures the atmosphere and enormity of the new story Bungie were building, while also remaining true to the game's origins. And now, for me, and I'm sure many others, it is permanently etched into nostalgia, along with the rest of Halo 2's score. Halo Combat Evolved may have had a simple but brilliant story. Halo 2 was jam-packed with new lore. While paying attention to the story is in no way required to enjoy Halo 2's phenomenal arenas, it does instill your slaughter with a sense of purpose. However, there is one place where skipping cutscenes would cause some confusion the first time you play as the Arbiter. Just 4 playable missions in, and you are no longer Master Chief. Instead, you are a member of the Covenant. You are an alien fighting other aliens? As long as you paid attention to the color of your crosshair, you would have been fine. And while some found this jarring, especially with Halo 2's marketing centering on Chief and his fight to save Earth, most got over it quickly, with many, including me, growing to love the attention to detail placed on the Covenant and the narrative of their political upheaval. Cutscenes conveyed all of this through excellent direction, while the story and its characters were fed additional life through spontaneous, natural character dialogue as you play.
Don't make me take off my belt!
The twin narrative would continue throughout the game as they began to intertwine, eventually culminating with the discovery of the Ark and Master Chief's return to Earth on the Forerunner key ship. But suddenly, because the third act had been cut, the controversial cliffhanger hits. While this ending was criticized by most of the gaming press, part of me was excited. And that's because, deep down, I knew they now had to make another Halo game. And for me, there could be nothing better. From a technical perspective, Halo 2's campaign featured impressively large battles, with more vehicle combat. Like in Combat Evolved, there were many situations where AI were fighting each other. This could have been taken advantage of, or admired from a distance. Although, AI in Halo 2 did struggle when driving vehicles, struggling to find natural paths and instead crashing into every wall possible. Despite this, AI was notably improved from Combat Evolved, with your AI team proving far more useful in combat. And now, rather than killing your teammates for weapons, which I would never do of course, you can now swap with them, even if the trade wasn't strictly, fair. All the things people loved in Combat Evolved had returned. The 2-weapon carry limit, grenade throws with a single button, and of course, recharging energy shields, which now remove the health bars from the original, solidifying the armor beeping sound as a warning of imminent death. So now, instead of worrying about where you'll find the next health kit, players could duck into cover once their shields were depleted, which ensured the pacing was intense and exciting. We also saw the introduction of new features. The vehicle jacking mechanic works like a treat, quickly inverting any power dynamic. Dual wielding, a highly anticipated feature, was easy and fun to use. While it could be argued the individual weapons were nerfed to balance having 2 of them, the Needlers have something to say. And now, finally, players could equip the energy sword and the fuel rod cannon, weapons that Combat Evolved dangled, then blew up in your face. These new weapons offered new possibilities of bravado, as the energy sword quickly drags you towards the enemy. However, on higher difficulties, you would have to keep your adrenaline in check. While easy and normal were notably easier than in Combat Evolved, heroic and legendary were much harder. For the higher difficulties, you may have wanted to bring a friend. Like its predecessor, Halo 2 supports cooperative split screen for up to 2 players. Once again, this mode was exceptionally fun, with Halo 2's gameplay naturally lending itself to cooperative play. Although a polarizing choice, when playing in widescreen, split screen is made vertical rather than horizontal, which gave players their own side of the display. While some enjoyed this use of screen real estate, others felt this was claustrophobic. Nonetheless, as people started moving onto Xbox Live, there were hopes you could play Halo 2's campaign online. That way, you'd have an entire display to yourself, while still being able to play with friends without having to leave the comfort of your own home. Bungie agreed, trying everything they could to get the netcode working. But it would never reach a state of being playable. Unfortunately, for the foreseeable future, you had to be physically next to your friends if you wanted to play campaign together. On the other hand, multiplayer was a completely different story. Many critics believed Xbox was wrong in trying to bring online play to consoles, but Microsoft knew Xbox Live was the future, and Halo 2 would forever change the landscape of console multiplayer. Bungie were not only competing with other Xbox Live titles, but Halo 2 was now going head-to-head with PC's online multiplayer, which at the time was considered unparalleled. Now all players with Xbox Live could experience arena battles of up to 16 players, familiar game types such as Slayer and Capture the Flag, along with new game types such as Territories, could now be played with opponents and teammates from across the world. Timeless maps like Lockout, which successfully varied close quarters and long-range battle, would be recreated in future Halo games. And so once again, despite all of the development challenges, Halo 2's online multiplayer is unquestionably brilliant. It was the perfect storm. Xbox Live mandated broadband, so connections were stable. Matchmaking ensured players were all of a comparable skill, and the use of the party system ensured friends could quickly and easily play together. This was a platform where people could meet and add each other to a virtual friends list, increasing their investment in the game. And these features were so successful, they would eventually pave the way for Xbox Live on the Xbox 360. Ultimately, Halo 2 was a huge success. Now, players of the PC and Mac versions of the original were waiting patiently for their release of Halo 2. Eventually, Microsoft would announce plans to bring it to Windows in 2007. But there was a catch. Halo 2 would only run on Microsoft's new operating system, Windows Vista. Following delays, one of which that could be attributed to nudity in an error message, courtesy of the in-house developers that ported the game, Halo 2 Vista was finally released. Initially, many found the game difficult to run at high resolutions and at stable frame rates on anything below the fastest computers at the time. And even when it did run smoothly, critics mentioned it suffered in comparison to the visuals of more recent PC games. After all, later that year would see the system killer, Crysis, be released. As such, compared to the stellar Xbox release, critics responded with lukewarm reviews for Halo 2 Vista. However, when you recognize that this is a fairly faithful port of a 2004 game, Halo 2 Vista did bring enhanced visuals, greatly improving textures and the resolution on computers that could handle it. Therefore, for all its shortcomings, Halo 2 Vista was a worthwhile purchase, but maybe just for existing fans of Halo 2 or die-hard PC gamers. For the rest, the Xbox copy was probably still the way to go. Halo 2 was incredibly fun, but I suppose all good things eventually come to an end. With 2010 comfortably within the Xbox 360's lifecycle, Microsoft decided to pull the plug on the original Xbox Live, and this included Halo 2. April 14th, 2010 was the last day people could experience the joys of the original Halo 2 online. Many nostalgically relived this experience one last time until, one by one, they were disconnected. However, many were able to continue playing past the April 14th deadline so long as they didn't disconnect or turn off their Xbox. The last 14 players, known as the Noble 14, kept their connections running, holding out for almost a month until their numbers started dwindling. Microsoft had been luring the final players with Halo Reach beta codes, perhaps hinting that it's time to try out another game, but these last players held out. Eventually, though, there was only one left, and their name was Apache Enforcer. But then, shortly before 11 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time in May 2010, Apache was booted from the game, marking the final connection to the original Halo 2 multiplayer. Halo 2 was the source of incredible memories for so many. Here, people made friendships, many of which I'm sure lasted to this day. But for now, it was time to say goodbye. However, that was not to be the end. Like its predecessor, Halo 2 is very much alive in the Master Chief Collection, though that story deserves a video of its own. Following one of the most difficult crunch times in gaming history, Bungie pulled off the impossible, creating a sequel that was just as groundbreaking as the first in its own way. Following 2004, many multiplayer games would become inspired by Halo 2, proving the timelessness of Bungie's formula. Even Bungie's original ideas would be released by future studios, with their large multiplayer battle mode reborn in Halo 5 Guardians as Warzone. From co-op with friends to spending countless hours matchmaking, Halo 2 forms a permanent part of many lives. I'd like to thank the Vengeful Vadam for giving me permission to use their footage. I've linked their channel in the description. I'd also like to give a shout out to the people who recorded their final moments on Halo 2 Online. A huge thanks to all the staff at Bungie, Microsoft, and 343 for creating and cultivating this incredible game. And of course, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more Halo content. You'll probably have noticed it's been a while since I last posted a video. Unfortunately, university submissions and the holidays got ahead of me. However, with this being my final semester at university, I will be establishing a regular schedule by the end of spring, and I have loads of content planned that I'm really excited to share. So once again, thank you so much for your support, and I'll catch you next time.